before I begin, my wife and I have never been to Ireland before, and this is actually my accent as a New Yorker, Long Islander, and my wife and I have been together for close to 50 years, and been doing some research on my Irish ancestors and Irish family, and I cannot believe all my cousins have come here to see me. My brain is dead by now. I don't know whose cousins anymore. But I hate to tell you this, I don't have much of an inheritance left.
Oh shit!
Especially after
the Irish shares were gone bust.
So I'll send you all cards and everything. Thank you so much. And I have to add you to my Christmas list from now on. There's another cousin. Wait a minute. She's from, I know you, recognize you. Hotel people. My God, everybody came down. And people we met in Rathkeel. And, oh my God, you came here to see a traveler, I know. Because I've been traveling like crazy. Now, forget you heard me talk like that.
I'm first.
I'm going to be introduced. Okay.
I have a speech.
She's got a speech. Talk about the Irish. Oh my gosh.
So, I want to see the flags back where I have it. Where's my Irish flag?
Blame him.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, so now. First of all, Adina Ushla, Fáilte Rib Gach Éine an Seo Anocht, which means, ladies and gentlemen, you are all very welcome to the People's Museum of Limerick tonight to welcome Robert Alvey's first presentation of his Mark Twain evening in Ireland. I would like to thank curator William O'Neill, the director, and his staff who helped arrange this evening. A word on how my cousin Mary Hennessy, put up your hand Mary, and I met Robert. It's all down to the miracle of DNA testing. First discovered in 1986 and used later for the solving of crime, but not by us. It became
Well, I didn't know about that.
It became widespread for family tracing. Ancestry.com was founded in 1998. A few years ago, I joined and sent off my sample. So did many people in the United States. Some weeks later, we found our cousin. Robert's grandmother and our grandmother were sisters. I knew our granny, Mary Ann Casey, who was born in Rathkeel in 1875 and lived to be 96. We remember her well. A very kind lady. She had two sisters, Aileen and Kathleen, who immigrated to the United States. I often wondered what happened to them there. So we didn't know. But we were delighted to discover that Aileen is Robert's grandmother. And
Who stayed an Irish citizen her entire life.
Here I am.
and we've been emailing each other for the last few years, Mary last night. At last we welcome Robert and his wife Susie on their very first visit to Ireland. When I asked him to put on his Mark Twain event, he agreed. There is no charge, but we have a donation box over there, which we will show you later, to help the Irish Red Cross help with the current disasters in Libya and the earthquake in Morocco. Both cities destroyed and thousands died. So Ireland, we are ready as Irish to do our bit to help them also. And now, may I welcome Mr. Robert Alvey and his wife Susie to Limerick's Museum tonight. Enjoy the show.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to present to you a man whose great learning and veneration for truth are only exceeded by his high moral to have introductions, I prefer to do them myself, so I can get in all the facts. I was born modest, but it wore off. I was once presented to an audience by a lawyer who kept his hands in his own pockets and introduced me as Mark Twain, a humorist who was really funny. I was so impressed. A rare creature indeed, while I was struck speechless by this complimentary thunderbolt. I scarcely in my life had heard a string of accolades and compliments so beautifully phrased or so well deserved. But I observed we had a much rarer creature in the audience, in our midst than a humorist who was really funny. We had a lawyer who kept his hands in his own pockets. Lawyers and congressmen have a well-earned reputation for being able to talk excessively with all sorts of flowery language and certainties and a spew of outlandish facts that have no factual basis, and opinions that they assure us are ours and everybody's, whether we agree with them or not, and talk so as to not accomplish anything. If God had waited for congressmen to finish speaking before he proclaimed, "Let there be light," we'd all still be in the dark. Oh, but I do like compliments. We all do. Humorists, burglars, congressmen, all of us in the trade. The plan of the newspapers is good. If you can't get a compliment from any other way, pay yourself one. I do that often. I can do that right now. I can state there are two people who are most remarkable. Rudyard Kipling is one, and I am the other. Kipling knows everything there is to know, covering all knowledge of all things. And I know the rest. The truth of the matter is it is better to keep your mouth shut and let people think you is stupid than to open your mouth and give them proof. I am extremely intelligent. She doesn't believe me. I'll prove it. As you know, the intelligence scale is actually a curve. My intelligence goes all the way to the top of the curve and then comes slowly down on the other side and pops out again at the label called idiot. That's where my distinct judgment skills originated. When I was putting together my first book, I did a stretch in Washington as a newspaper correspondent. And every day I went over to Congress and reported on the inmates there. It was very entertaining, and one of them got a bill passed to construct a dam where there wasn't any water. But they didn't find that out until they finished building the dam. So they had an investigation to see if they could build a river to save the dam. God made idiots first. That was for practice. Then he made Congress. If we could learn what the human race is really like at the bottom, we only need to observe it in election times. Get your facts first. Then you can distort them at your leisure. I always wondered why God invented lawyers. Did his mind wander? The more I see of lawyers, the more I favors hanging. Well, it's good to be here in Limerick. It's my first trip here. I want to thank you for all of you for attending these services this evening. I nearly missed it by myself. I came by railroad. It was one of those trains that gets tired every 7 minutes or so and has to stop and rest a half an hour. You know the railroad I'm talking about. One of the passengers advised the conductor to take the cow catcher off the front of the train and put it on the end of the train. Because at the rate we're going, we're not likely to catch any cows, but there's nothing to prevent the cows from climbing up onto the train from the rear. If I has to go to heaven by railroad, I shall go the other way. There was a dog that got on board early in the morning and barked steadily at nothing the whole trip. I never saw one of his kind before. It was a long, low dog with very short legs, kind of like a parentheses upside down. It was made on the plan of a bench, really, and it seemed to be satisfied. But I thought the plan structurally weak on account of the distance between the forward and the rear legs. Now, if I think to me it would have been a stronger and much more practical dog if it had more legs. Two at least in the middle. I didn't ask what type of dog it was, although the owner seemed to be very proud of it, said it had taken prizes in dog shows, said people also stopped on the street to look at it. Well, it did seem strange to me. I could have told them that if you had a great, long, low dog like that and waddled him on the street anywhere in the world and not charge people, people would stop and stare. Why, if I were built like that, I could take prizes myself. Now, as a writer and a book publisher, I certainly did not pass up the opportunity to visit the Limerick Public Library, spending a lot of time to note how many of my own works are on the shelves and how often they've been taken out for reading. A few of my books are considered classics. The word classic means that many people have heard of people who have read the book. Or have a copy of the book. Or know someone who's got a copy of the book. But they've never actually read it. Or know anybody who has read it. The definition of classic actually must mean I'll get around to it someday. It's a book which people praise and figure someone else read so they doesn't have to. I did happen to notice a copy of my classic book Tom Sawyer on the shelves, as well as a copy of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. They were dusty, but I was pleased. Huck Finn has helped me make a tidy bit of money during my life. Some libraries have banned it, burned it publicly. The moral crusaders in these towns in the U.S. publicly proclaim the book to be scandalous, controversial, racist, irreverent, lewd, and not fit for children. Whenever I hears that, I print up another 25,000 copies. And it usually sells out in a week. I'm keeping you awake. I'll try not to do that too often. There's a time lag here between here and Florida, where my wife and I are from, but that's okay. I did find at this library a couple of copies of a children's popular book, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Oh, while this book may not be considered a classic 100 years from now, it sure seems to have been read a lot. I've decided it's time for me to get my act together and write a brand new book. But having learned that what an author can make more money when he writes a series of books using the same characters. So I'm still working on the name of my new book. The working title I have right now is The Further Adventures of Tom Sawyer with Harry Potter on Star Trek with James Bond. Oh, you all want to take orders from her on that one. I remember growing up. That was a long time ago. I didn't have much white hair in those days. It didn't rain so much in the summer then. The sunsets were redder. There were more old people. The world was full of them. Now it's full of young people. Funny, you'd expect it to be the other way around. To put human life simply, birth is simply the beginning. Life is merely the journey, and death is the final destination of us all. We all share that equally, and yet there is not one person amongst us who at one time or another has wanted to help another person take the shortcut on their journey and get them to their final destination as quickly as possible. The gods offer no rewards for intellect. There never was one god yet who showed any interest in it. To be good is to be noble. But to show others how to be good is noble and no trouble. However, be good and you will be lonesome. Now, heaven is not quite the paradise we were taught to expect. Most of it is zoned no smoking. There are plenty of dogs in heaven and a few cats, but only enough for the entertainment of the dogs. After all, a dog is truly man's best friend, and his loyalty to man is unsurpassed. Simple, but loving. can do a simple experiment to show that a dog is man's best friend. Now, I'm sort of a scientist, so I'll explain this one. First, you get yourself a large box, and you puts it down, and you open it up, and you grab your child, take them, and put them in the box. Then you look around, and you go over and get your mother-in-law, and you pull her over, and you put her in the box too. And then you go and get your dog, and you put the dog in the box, and then you close the box. And then you sit down on the box for about a half an hour or so. I usually like to have a cigar while I'm doing this. And at the end of the time, when you reach down and you open up the box, who's going to be happy to see you? Your dog! The Supreme Being also wanted me to let you know that your many messages and verbal pleas are all received. They are all heard. But I have to report to you that God's last name is not damn it. The biggest surprise I had when I landed in heaven was to discover that the Supreme Being, the very creator of the universe, the solar system, and our own little planet, does not in the least resemble an omnipotent and wise old human being, but is actually a large dog. The dog's name is Lordy, a fine and fitting name for a dog or a supreme being. Many of my southern friends have acknowledged unknowingly called on her help simply by crying out, "Oh, Lordy!" Lordy's a mother. She's a good dog, and she's smart. It seems that our earliest religious writers may have been aware that the great dog, but they were dyslexic and spelled it backwards in the religious books. This has been a bit of an embarrassment to the great dog ever since. When you think about it, it's perfectly obvious that a dog was the creator of the earth, since it's round like a ball and does shake occasionally. It's something dogs like to play with. Besides, a dog is man's best friend, and the great dog made sure there were humans on the planet to be companions to the dogs. I like cats too. They're quieter than children. And I like everything about cats except their singing voices. We have one, a Presbyterian soprano. She's partial to hymns and sings the old 100 every night on a picket fence out in back of the house. It's useless to shout at her. She takes it for applause and tries even harder to sing. I have thought how beautiful she would be in death. But a cat is a fine animal. If you could cross a man with a cat, you'd improve the man and deteriorate the cat. Animal minds are simple and therefore sharp. Animals never spend their time dividing experience into little bits and speculating about the bits they missed. The whole panoply of a universe is expressed to them as one things to mate with, 2 things to eat, 3 things to run away from, and D, rocks. This frees the mind from unnecessary thought and gives it a cutting edge where it matters. Your normal animal, in fact, never tries to walk and chew gum at the same time. Man was made at the end of the work's week, when God was tired. Such is the human race. Often it does seem a pity that Noah didn't miss the boat. Man is the only animal that has true religion. Several of them. There was a man who died, and St. Peter welcomed him to Heaven's Hotel and asked him what denomination he was. And the man replied, Baptist. So St. Peter rubbed his chin and escorted to the room 12, but asked him to keep quiet when they passed room 6. Another man died, and St. Peter, finding out that the man was Methodist, escorted him quietly to room 14, but told him to hush when they passed room 6. A Lutheran couple died, and St. Peter led them to room 7, but he told them not to make any noise when they passed room 6. A Mormon and his 3 wives were killed, and St. Peter walked them to room 23, but advised them to keep quiet when they passed room 6. One of the wives turned and looked at St. Peter and said, Why? Who's in room 6? St. Peter looked at her and said, That's for the Catholics. They think they're the only ones here. I do know what country I'm visiting. I knew one man named Jim Bushwell who spent his entire life diligently trying to acquire the heavenly life. After Jim died and reached heaven, wouldn't you know, the first person he met was one he was hoping all the time was in hell. Jim was so disappointed and outraged, he inquired the way to hell, then picked up his suitcase and left. So there you have it. Heaven for climate and hell for society. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I do hope you don't mind if I smoke. I know there is some commandment against smoking when you're in an insurrection of this dignified nature, but I'm working to have it removed. Mind you, I have no arguments and objections to abstinence, just as long as it doesn't harm anybody. I practice it on myself on occasion. I make it a rule never to smoke when I'm asleep. It's not that I care for moderation myself. I just do it as an example to others. I have to prove that I am not a slave to the habit. I can give it up any time I want to. In fact, I've given it up 1,000 times at least. First time I gave up smoking, I must have been a boy about 10 or 11. They told me that I would shorten my life for 10 years by smoking. So I finally decided, I got scared, and I gave it up. One day, for 2 or 3 hours, then I finally decided that decade wouldn't be worth living without smoking in it. So I went back to lighting a cigar, and that's the end of that. Well, another time, I gave it up on the advice of my doctor. I had been confined to my bed for several days with the lumbago and a flu, and the doctor finally said, "Mr. Twain, my remedies haven't got a chance considering all they have to fight against. Besides the lumbago, you smoke extravagantly. You eat all manner of things that don't agree with each other, and you drink 2 large tumblers of whiskey and scotch every night, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, but I only drink them as a preventative for a toothache." I've never had a toothache, and frankly, I don't intend to ever have a toothache. He said, "That's right, but we can't make any progress that way. You've got to moderate those things." I said, "I can't do that, doctor." He says, "Why can't you?" I said, "Because I lack the willpower. I could cut them off entirely, but I can't moderate them." He said, "Well, that'll have to do." So I cut off those things for 2 days and 2 nights. At the end of that time, the lumbago was so discouraged it got up and left me. I was a well man again, and I gave thanks and took to these delicacies once more and lit a cigar. Then I had the occasion to recommend this remedy to an elderly lady friend of mine. She'd gone down, 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 down to the point where medicines had no healthy effect on her anymore. So I told her I could cure her. I told her I could cure her in a week. I said she must give up smoking and drinking and eating and swearing, and by the end of the week, she'd be back on her feet. And she sadly replied she couldn't give up smoking or drinking and swearing because she had never done any of these things. So there it was. She'd neglected her habits. Poor lady, it was like a sinking ship, no cargo to throw overboard. Why, just 1 or 2 little bad habits could have saved her. What a shame. Oh. Now, I've been trying to throw some variety into these services. I recently wrote Arnold Carnegie requesting a copy of a hymn book. Now the newspapers got a hold of that letter and printed it under the heading, "Mark Twain asks for a hymn book." My dear Mr. Carnegie, I can see by the papers that you are very prosperous. I wants to get a hymn book. It costs $2. I will bless you. God will bless you, and you will do it a great deal of good to send me a hymn book. Very truly yours, Mark Twain. P.S. Don't send me the hymn book, send me the $2. I wanted to select it myself. I'm not lying to you. I don't tell lies. I differ from George Washington. George could not tell a lie. I can, but I won't. Now, I was born in Missouri, and my father died when I was 12, and I wound up getting experience in a variety of trades: printing, writing, merchandising, and eventually became a riverboat pilot on the Mississippi River. When the Civil War broke out, I joined up with the South, being a patriotic youth. I did not stay a soldier too long. Oh, I liked the way I looked in a fancy uniform. Marching and practicing was okay, but I quickly learned an important point. never march to a battlefield where the vultures look overfed. As the march to our first battle commenced, I had the misfortune to get sidetracked, and by a wonderfully beautiful flower I saw growing in the edge of the woods, and when I went to pick it up, I accidentally tore my sleeve on a thorn. So I returned to camp to change my shirt. I missed the entire firefight, but later saw a buzzard circling the field. So I decided to go west instead on an overland stage and seek my fortune in the civil land of the Nevada Territory. I eventually settled in Virginia City, which was a good place for a man to lose his religion, but it had already left me by the time I got there. There was wide open gambling places, murders, street fights, riots, a whiskey every 16 steps, and half dozen jails, and talk about building a church. That was no place for a Presbyterian. I did not remain one for very long. I eventually left Virginia City as a reporter and went to San Francisco, where I became unemployed. I spent a considerable amount of time looking for a job, but this was very difficult as I didn't want to do any actual work. Then Lady Luck happened to smile on me, and I was given a post in the Sacramento Union newspaper as their correspondent to the Sandwich Islands. Whoa, well, our first stop was Honolulu. I was naturally anxious to explore this dreamy and enchanted place, and they told me the best way to do it was to hire a horse. Well, I had some unpleasant experiences with these unpredictable creatures before in Carson City, Nevada. I once made a mistake of buying a genuine thoroughbred horse on the advice of a man who I later found out was the auctioneer's brother. Soon as I mounted the horse, he put all his feet together in a bunch and lowered his back and then shot me straight into the air 4 or 5 feet. I came down again, landed almost on the saddle, so it shot me up again, which was too much for a variety for me. I decided to get off, but I was in the air again before I could find out which way to go, and the thoroughbred horse was gone, and I landed in the mud. As I got up off the ground, I made up my mind that if the auctioneer's brother's funeral took place while I was in Garden City, I'd postpone all other recreation and attend it. Well, experiences like that increase a man's respect for dumb animals. So in Honolulu, I ruled out a fast horse, and I wanted a safe one. I asked for an excessively gentle horse, one with no spirit, a lame one at that. So they showed me an animal that looked like it wanted to lean up against something, so I chose him. He went along peaceably enough, but so absorbed in meditation, it began to worry me. I thought to myself, this horse is planning to some outrage. No horse ever thought over a subject so profoundly just for nothing. The more I watched him, it preyed on me, the more my mind became frightened. And the more I rode him, the more worried I became for my life. Finally, I dismounted to see if there was anything really wild in his eye. I can't tell you what a relief it was to find that he had only fallen asleep. Well, about noon, I spurred my animated trance alongside a stretch of sand at the beach where I noticed a bevy of beautiful, nude, young native ladies bathing in the area. Now, this was the sort of local color I was looking for the newspaper. So I went down and sat on their clothes to make sure they weren't being stolen, and begged them to come out, for it seemed to me the sea was rising. I was satisfied with they were running some risk, but they went right on with their sport, swimming races and splashing about. Oh, it was a heartwarming spectacle. When I finally turned around to leave, I was surprised to find the horse had fallen asleep again, which goes to show that there is a difference between the man and the horse. You can lead a horse to water, but you cannot rely on him to gather news. I once interviewed the king of the Sandwich Islands, which now we know is Hawaii, and he said, "We understand Christianity. We have eaten the missionaries." Well, after my adventures out there in the Sandwich Islands, I got back to San Francisco, and I arrived back with a bad cold. Oh, to cure it, the hotel clerk advised me to take a quart of whiskey every 24 hours. Another friend advised the same thing. That made half a gallon. Oh, I'd been drunk before, but that was a masterpiece. I still burp every once in a while thinking about a half gallon of Scotch whiskey every day just to feel better. After my adventures on the Pacific coast, I went east, and I met a young woman by the name of Olivia Langdon. Livy's mother was very wary of me, in the same sense that two pit bulls are wary of each other before they fight. Mrs. Langdon promised to be the fulfillment of every horror story that has ever been passed down through the centuries of the evils of the demon known as the mother-in-law. But she gave me two wonderful and long-lasting gifts. The first was that she consented to allow Lily to marry me. The second gift was just as rare and beautiful and precious. She died. Livy and I were married, and she reformed me for a while. Well, during the first 2 decades of our marriage, we lived in Hartford, Connecticut, which you know is a city whose fame as an insurance center is renowned throughout the world. As a matter of fact, we citizens of Hartford have the reputation of being a triple band of brothers, working sweetly hand in hand. First, there's the Colt Gun Company, making the destruction of our race easy and convenient. Second, there's our life insurance companies, paying for the victims as they pass away. And thirdly, there's our fire insurance company, taking care of them after they're gone. Well, after I become sufficiently he understood that joke. After I become sufficiently notorious up there in Hartford, I was made a director in one of those accident insurance companies. And I want to tell you, it gave me a whole new outlook on accidents. Why, I was at a fire, and I happened to recognize an elderly client of ours leaning out the window of a third-story window, yelling for help. Well, everybody in the crowd looked up at him, but nobody did anything. Nobody had any presence of mind but me. I came to the rescue. I yelled for a rope. When it came, I took one end of it and threw it up to the old man. He caught it, and I told him to tie it around his waist. He did, and then I pulled him down. You know, there's nothing more beneficial than accident insurance. I've known whole families to be lifted right out of poverty. I've had people come up to me on crutches with tears in their eyes to bless this beneficent institution. And in all my experiences in life, I've never seen anything so wonderful as to look on a freshly mutilated man's face when he reaches into his vest pocket with his remaining hand and finds his accident policy safe. We have some of the most unusual cases come into that charity. There was a poor fella named Wheeler who worked in a carpet factory. Well, one day Wheeler was meditating and dreaming around in the carpet factory, and the machinery made a snatch out of him. And the first thing you know, Wheeler was meandering all over the factory, going faster and faster. You couldn't even see him, you only heard him whiz as he went by. Well, Wheeler got wove up into 39 yards of the finest 3-ply carpeting. His widow was sorry. Oh, she was uncommonly sorry, but she did the best she could for him under the circumstances, which were unusual. She bought the whole roll of rug. All 39 yards. And she wanted to give him a proper burial and an honor burial, but she couldn't bear to roll him up again. Yes. So she took and spread him out full length. She wanted to buy a tunnel for him, but there were no tunnels for sale at the time. So she boxed it in a beautiful box and stood him on a pedestal on a hill, in which she painted on it, to the loving memory of 39 yards of the finest 3-ply carpeting containing the mortal remains of Milton G. Wheeler. Go ye and do likewise. You know, I've been told I have good judgment, but that isn't a compliment I appreciate. Good judgment comes from experiences you get from bad judgment. It's good to get your mistakes done early. I don't believe in personal improvement. Every improvement you make just creates new problems. That's my philosophy. Life is hard. That's just how it is. You can read all the books you want and meditate and reduce stress and lose weight. Sorry for the information. I know you don't really care, but you want to know. But the fact is, life is tough. Good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from making mistakes caused by bad judgment. So the smarter you get, the less you learn, and eventually when you think you got it all figured out, you realize you don't know a thing. Here's an example. Build a man a fire, and he'll be warm for the rest of the day. Set a man on fire, and he'll be warm for the rest of his life. The trouble with having an open mind, of course, is that people will insist on coming along and trying to put things in it. It is often said that before you die, your life passes before your eyes. It's a true fact. It's called living. I spent the first 4.5 billion years as part of this planet without any complaints whatsoever. It's been only during the last 70 years or so where I've had a few issues. Think about that. There's a rumor going around that I have found God. I think it's unlikely because I have enough difficulty finding my keys. And there's empirical evidence that my keys exist. That's water. Gin to you too. Now, we have had a good number of different discussions here, and I appreciate you putting up with me. I'm going to read a letter that I had published in 1903. Was the world made for man? Think about this one. I seems to be the only scientist and theologian still remaining to be heard from on this important subject of whether the world was made for man or not. I feel it is time for me to speak. I stand almost with all the others. They believe the world was made for man. They believe it likely that it was made for man. They think there is proof, astronomical mainly, that the world was made for man. I think there is evidence only, not proof, that it was made for him. It is too early yet to arrange the verdict. The returns are not all in. When they are all in, I think they will show the world was made for man, but we must not hurry. We must patiently wait until all the verdicts and evidence are in. Now, as far as we got, astronomy is on our side. Alfred Wallace has clearly shown this. He has clearly shown two things: that the world was made for man and that the universe was made for the world. To study it, the astronomy part is settled and cannot be challenged. We now comes to the geological part. This is the one where the evidence is not all in yet. It is coming in hourly, daily, coming in all the time, but naturally it comes with geological carefulness and deliberation. And we must not be impatient. We must not get excited. We must be calm and wait. To lose our tranquility will not hurry geology. Nothing hurries geology. It takes a long time to prepare the world for man. Such a thing cannot be done in a day. Some of the great scientific, carefully deciphering evidences furnished by geology have arrived at the conviction that our world is prodigiously old. And they may be right. according to Kelvin's figures, it took 99 million years to prepare the world for man. Impatient as the Creator doubtless was to see him and admire him, but a large enterprise like this has to be conducted warily, painstakingly, logically. It was foreseen that man would first have to have the oyster. Therefore, the first preparation of the world was made for the oyster. Very well, you cannot simply make an oyster. You must make the oyster's ancestor first. This was not done in a day. You must make a vast variety of invertebrates too, to start and see with what will happen and soak in the primary sea, and wait and see what happens. And the mighty ages creep on through the Archean and the Cambrian periods, pile their lofty crags in the primordial seas, and at last the grand stage and the preparation of the world for man stands completed. The oyster is done. An oyster hardly has any more reasoning power than a scientist has, and it has been reasonably certain that the first oyster jumped to the conclusion that the 19 million years was a preparation for him. And that would be just like an oyster, which is the most conceited animal there is, except man. And anyway, this one could not know at the early date that he was only an incident in a scheme, and that there was some more in the scheme yet. The oyster having been achieved and evolved, the next thing needed in the preparation of the world for man was fish. Fish and coal to fry it with. So the old Silurian seas were opened up to breed the fish in, and at the same time the great work of building old red sandstone mountains 80,000 feet high to cold storage their fossil fuels was begun. It took 20 million years until there was enough coal and fish in the world. Oh. So the years drag on, and sometimes the fish culture is lazing along in a way that can make a person tired. You have developed 10,000 kinds of fishes from the oyster, and come to look, you have raised nothing but fossils. Nothing but extinctions. The Paleozoic time limit having now been reached, it was necessary that the next stage of the preparation of the world for man, by opening up the Mesozoic age and instituting some reptiles. For man would need reptiles, not to eat, but to develop himself from. What wonders follow? Yes, it took 30 million years and 20 million reptiles to get one that would stick around long enough to develop into something else and proceed the scheme to the next step. Then the pterodactyl was burst upon the world, and its impressive solemnity and grandeur and all nature were realized in the Cainozoic threshold that crossed was a new period open for business, and its new stage begun in the preparation of the globe for man. It may be that the pterodactyl thought the 30 million years had been intended as a preparation for himself. It was nothing too foolish for a pterodactyl to think, but he was in error. The preparation was for man. Without doubt, the pterodactyl attracted great attention, for even the least observant could see there was in the making of him of a bird in him. Now from this time onward, another 30 million years flew by, and the preparation moved briskly. Then came the ice sheet, and they all retreated before they crossed the bridge at Bering Strait and wandered over all of Europe and Asia and died, except a few life forms, to continue the preparation of the world for man. 6 glacial periods with 2 million years between periods chased these poor orphans up and down on the earth, from weather to weather, from tropic swelter at the poles to Arctic frost at the equator, and back again and to and fro, and they never knew quite what kind of weather was going to be up next. Kind of reminds me of Ireland. I'm sorry, I threw that in. They led this unsettled and irritating life for 25 million years, half the time afloat, half the time aground, and always wondering what it was for, never suspecting, of course, that it was a preparation of the world for man, and had to be done just so, or there wouldn't be any proper or harmonious place for him when he arrived. Then came the monkey, and anybody could see that man wasn't far off now, and in truth that was so. The monkey went on developing for close to 5 million years, and then turned into a man, for all appearances. Such is the history of it. Man has been here 300,000 years. That it took 100 million years to prepare the world for him is proof that that is what, why, and what it was done for. I suppose it is, I don't know. If the Eiffel Tower were now representing the world's age, the skin of the paint on the pinnacle knob at the summit would represent man's share of that age, and anyone would perceive that the skin was what the tower was built for. I reckon they would. I don't know. Yeah. I'm taking a little bit of a break to explain that. I'm Rob Alvey. That was a letter and an article that I heard a fellow named Hal Holbrook give at a concert where I saw him do Mark Twain Tonight a number of years ago. And I had never known where he got that from. And I said, I'm a geologist. He says, I know you are. When I met you a few months ago and we talked and you took a picture of me with your wife and you got my book and things, you said you were a geologist. You weren't a full-time actor. And I said, yeah. He says, I could tell. But you put it into me and I wanted to do a performance of Mark Twain's actual letter about the history of man. Because those are geology terms that I know. And I have taught so many college students those geology terms. And when I taught at York College, after I got the script, the letter from Hal Holbrook said, yes, use this, it's from this source. I gave it at York College where I taught. And I was very much impressed. And my students stayed awake the whole time. And then the dean came out, and the president of the university said, oh, Mr. Alvey, Professor A, come over here. This is for you. And he gave me a small award. And I went, whoa, that's nice. The retribution I have is, sadly, I have to read you that whole letter and story wherever I act next. It's my gift to the geologists in the world. Yeah, I've still got a little bit of time, but I'll say if you're really bored and you want to skedaddle, you can just sneak out of here quick, and I won't say anything. But before you go, there's a box over there to donate money to the museum. Anyway, now, to get back to the importance of tonight, I can read you a different story that Mark Twain wrote, Samuel Clemens. And it's from the book called Roughing It. This was one of his first books. And it was basically, the Civil War had broken out. He lost his position as a riverboat pilot because he was afraid both the North and the South were going to confiscate all the riverboats and make the pilots sail for them. And he didn't want to get involved. But he also found out that his older brother, Orion, had gotten an appointment as a newspaper publisher in Missouri in support of the election of a fellow named Abraham Lincoln. And as a reward for his editorials endorsing Lincoln, he was appointed secretary to the Secretary of the Nevada Territories. And it was going to go out west. So his younger brother Samuel said, we'll go out together. I'll start over there. There's a lot of gold and silver mining over there. I'll be away from the war, and I'll pay for the stagecoach because I have a lot of money from my salary as a riverboat pilot. And you don't have any money, Orion, so they went together. And this is from Roughing It. The Pony Express rider. In a little while, all interest was taken up in stretching our necks and watching while we were on the stagecoach for the pony rider, the fleet messenger who spread across the continent from St. Joe to Sacramento, carrying letters 1,900 miles in 8 days. Think of that for perishable horse and human flesh and blood to do. The pony rider was usually a little bit of a man, brimming full of spirit and endurance. No matter what time of day or night his watch came on, and no matter whether it was winter, summer, raining, snowing, hailing or sleeting, or whether his beat was at a level straight road or a crazy trail over a mountain range or precipices, or whether it went through peaceful regions or swarmed with hostile Indians, he must always be ready to leap into the saddle and be off like the wind. There was no idling time for a pony rider on duty. He rode 50 miles without stopping, by daylight, moonlight, starlight, or through the blackness of darkness. Just as it happened, he rode a splendid horse that bore of a racer and fed and lodged like a gentleman, and kept him at utmost speed for 10 miles. And then, as he came crashing up to the station, stood 2 men holding fast to a fresh, impatient horse. And the transfer of rider and mailbag was made in a twinkling of an eye. And they flew away again, the eager pair, and were out of sight before the spectator could hardly get the ghost of a look. Both rider and horse went flying light. The rider's dress was thin and close fit. He wore a roundabout and tucked his pantaloons into his boot tops like a race driver to get as fast as he could. He carried no arms. He carried nothing that was not absolutely necessary. Not even the postage on his literary freight was worth $5 a letter. His horse was stripped of all unnecessary weight too. He wore a little wafer of a racing saddle and no visible blanket. He wore light shoes with none at all. The little flat mail pocket strapped under the rider's thighs would hold about the bolt of a child's primer book. They held many and many an important business chapter and newspaper letter. But these were written on paper so thin and so airy as gold leaf, nearly, and thus bulk and weight were economized for the rider, the Pony Express man. There were about 80 pony riders in the saddle all the time, day and night, stretching a long, scattering procession from Missouri to California, flying 40, flying eastward, Florida, flying westward, and among them making 400 gallant horses earn a thriving livelihood and see a great deal of scenery every single day. We had a consuming desire from the beginning to see a pony rider, but somehow or other, all that passed us and all that met us managed to streak by at night. So we heard only a whiz and a hail, and a swift phantom of the desert was gone before we could get our heads out of the stagecoach when the driver exclaimed, "There he goes, the Pony Express." Well, I can continue for a little while longer, and as you might notice, I'm getting a little bit older. I know you're all starting to feel a lot older. But, you know, there is a familiar old maxim which assures us that man is the noblest work of God. Now, who found that out? I don't think it was to decide too soon, not until all the returns are in. Well, I won't be there to count them. I'm 70. 70. Last year, I celebrated my 70th escape from the gallows. I am approaching the threshold of age. Well, when you get to be 70, you're supposed to sit up there with that longevity summit and tell the rest of us how to get up there. They all do this, you know, all these garrulous old people. They explain the process and dwell on the particulars with senile rapture. I was young once. Well, I've been anxious to explain the system for some time, and now I have the right. I think I have achieved my 70 years in the usual way of sticking straight to a lifestyle that would kill anyone else. Now, I have a few simple rules that I try to follow. I make it a point never to smoke more than one cigar at a time. I have no other restrictions. I've never smoked cigars that were too fancy either. Oh, there's always some fancy bands are too expensive for me. I always smokes the cheap ones. Well, reasonably cheap, that is. 60 years ago, the cigars I smoked cost me $4 a barrel. But my tastes have improved lately, and now I pay $7, or $6 or $7. I think $7, but that includes the barrel. Now, I've never taken any exercise except sleeping and resting. I don't intend ever to take any either. I don't see the benefit of being tired. As for diet, I try to be very strict about eating things that don't agree with me until one or the other gets the best of it. Last spring, I nearly got the best of myself, but had to stop frolicking with mince pie after midnight, it nearly exploded in my stomach. No one ever told me the pies were loaded. But the point I want to make is that you cannot reach old age by following another man's road. My habits protect my life, but they'd probably assassinate you. You've got to make your own rules and stick to them. That's not as easy as it sounds. There'll always be someone around trying to reform you, trying to take all the pleasure out of your life and replace it with dreariness. But don't let them. If you can't make 70th by a comfortable road, don't go. I'm going to leave my skull to Cornell University so the scientists can examine it and send me a report. I suppose it's a good idea to obey the rules while you're young, just so you'll have the strength to break them when you're older. But you cannot forget that experience is the best way to find out about something. A fella who takes a hold of a bull by the tail is getting 60 or 70 times as much information as the fellow who hasn't. Anyone who starts carrying a cat home by the tail is getting knowledge that's always useful and is likely never to grow dim or doubtful. And chances are he won't carry a cat that way anymore. But if he wants to carry the cat by the tail, I say let him. It isn't always easy to be eccentric, you know. Now, let me share a personal perspective of my top 10 observations for aging gracefully. Number 1, I talks to myself because sometimes I need expert advice. Number 2, I don't need anger management. I simply need people to stop pissing me off. My people skills are just fine. It's my tolerance for idiots that needs work. The biggest lie I tell myself is, I don't need to write that down. I'll remember it. When I was a child, I thought nap time was punishment. Now it seems like a mini vacation. Number 6, even duct tape can't fix stupid, but it can muffle the sound. Number 7, wouldn't it be great if we could just put ourselves in the dryer for 10 minutes, come out wrinkle-free and 3 sizes smaller? Number 8, getting lucky means walking into a room and remembering while we're there. Number 9, oh, this is for us all that have gray hair. Trying to keep track of my passwords is like herding kittens. Again, what? That's my password. Oh. Number 10, I still likes road trips, but the restrooms seem to be spaced further and further apart. What a person needs is some sort of book of instructions for life. The trouble with life is you don't get a chance to practice it before doing it for real. Think of that anyway. Now, I will say a few more things. You guys seem to be familiar with some of my life experiences and my work. And I've done a lot of research looking back over the years. Mr. Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, wrote under a lot of different names, but he always had a same style of writing. That's why some people can identify something as Mark Twain's work, or they think it's Mark Twain's work, because it sounds like something Mark Twain would have said. Now, since you are seeing me, Mark Twain, right in front of you, we're going to go through and I'm going to say some passages that even though Mark Twain did not say them himself, you, when you meet your friends, from now on can say, I know Mark Twain said that. I actually heard him say it. Mark Twain did not say, coming back to where you started is not the same as never leaving. The trouble with having an open mind, of course, is that people will insist on coming along and trying to put things in it. In the beginning, there was nothing, which exploded. A geology joke. Stories of imagination tend to upset those without one. Close your ears for a second on this one, darling wife. A marriage is always made up of two people who are prepared to swear that only the other partner snores. Geography is just physics slowed down with a couple of trees stuck in it. And education is a bit like a communicable sexual disease that makes you unsuitable for a lot of jobs, and then you had the urge to pass it on. The truth may be out there, but the lies are inside your head. Real stupidity beats artificial intelligence every time. Human beings make life so interesting. Do you know that in a universe so full of wonders, they have managed to invent boredom? Some humans would do anything to see if it was possible to do it. If you could put a large switch in some cave someplace with a sign on it saying, "End of the world switch, please do not touch," the paint wouldn't even have time to dry before the world ended. Yeah. Most gods throw dice, but fate plays chess. And you don't find out until it's too late that he's been playing with two queens all along. Pets are always a help in times of stress and in times of starvation too. Think about this one really carefully. Another science one in my side pocket. Light thinks it travels faster than anything but it is wrong. No matter how fast light travels, it finds the darkness has always got there first and is waiting for it. So tell your folks that these were Mark Twain quotes, and you actually heard Mr. Twain speak of it. Now, I have one other one. It's like, never let schooling interfere with your education. But there was a fellow named Alan Grant who said the similar idea in 1907. Oh, the secret of getting started is getting started. Sounds like a Mark Twain. Attributed to Mark Twain. It was actually written and spoken by a lady named Agatha Christie. If I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. Easy to say that. But Blaise Pascal, a French physicist and writer, actually gave us that insight. Now, 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than the ones you did. For some reason, Mark Twain gets credit for this, despite zero evidence. Is nothing showing that I ever wrote it anywhere. The quote is actually pretty recent. American author H. Jackson Brown attributed to his mother in his book, P.S. I Love You. When Mom wrote, she always saved the best for last. 91. And then, famous quote which I said before in my own little humor for you. Go to heaven for the climate, hell for the company. One of my favorites. But we think that Mark Twain and A. James N. Barrie, creator of the book and story Peter Pan, wrote similar phrases in the 1890s. And then accounts show that politician Ben Wade said something nearly identical in the 1880s. Mark Twain was alive and doing his routines. But that's what I like. My favorite quote, some of you should recognize that it's not really me giving that one. Never put off till tomorrow what you can do the day after tomorrow. Another quip that makes from the world of Mark Twain quotes, and it was almost entirely not my own creation. Some sources credit Oscar Wilde for saying that. And other variations of this sentiment have been noticed as far back as the 14th century, suggesting that this proverb, whose original speaker will be forever unknown, but I'll take credit for it, and now you can swear you heard Mark Twain say it. And my personal favorite, which I've used for 10 years before I realized Mr. Twain never actually said it. The coldest winter I ever spent was a summer I spent in San Francisco.
Ladies and
Limerick slumbered, the unsung heroes of the Limerick Writers Centre, and modesty prevents me from honouring the unsung heroes of BareSpot Productions, and
I also found out he talks more than I do.
Transport for the great man was provided by Mary Hennessy and Martin O'Brien.
Hooray!
Now, this is our collection, which will go to the Red Cross for the recent tragedies in Morocco and Libya. Now, that's the commercial. Mr. Twain, aka Robert, would like you all to join him in some sherbets in Mr. Hickey's Emporium, the likes of Bushmills, Powers Gold Label, etc. and so on. Otherwise known as South's Emporium of Delights. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, you've been a great audience.
Nice audience reaction, huh? Good house. Thanks.
How did you rest them all up? How did you rest them all up? The brother didn't make it.